Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Before we get started on this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. Share all your comments and suggestions in the section below. It's been around a month since my last Senate prediction. So in today's video, we're going to be updating my Senate prediction. I don't think there's too many changes from last month, but it's great to definitely revisit it once a month. And more recently when we get up to the election, and there hasn't been too much polling out of many of these states, except a few, such as like Arizona. But others, don't have much polling, and there's some interesting races here, and we're gonna take them all one at a time, beginning with these safe states for Democrats. First of all, we're gonna start on the West. We're gonna have these states of California and Washington, pretty easily gonna be in the safe column for Democrats, as well as we're gonna go up the East Coast and label all these states here for safe for Democrats, as well as New York State. Also for Democrats, we're going to be adding the state of Minnesota. Now in Minnesota, usually, people would consider, since it's competitive on the presidential level, why isn't it competitive on the Senate level? And it's because the incumbent, Amy Klobuchar, is extremely popular. And there hasn't been too much polling, but the polling that has had her, that has been polled in this state shows, her winning by what we expected, 14 points, 17, and earlier 16 points. And we can see here from 2018 and 2012 that she won by huge amounts. So there's definitely no doubt about that. I do think right now Minnesota is going to be in the safe column for Democrats. And I believe this is all that Democrats will win by 12 points or more. And for Republicans, we're going to have all of these states around in the West: Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, Indiana, and the first flip is going to be the state of West Virginia. The incumbent is not running for re-election, Joe Manchin, where he'd won barely in 2018 and by a pretty large amount in 2012. So the current governor is running for the Senate, and he will definitely win by a safe margin in a state that Trump will most likely win by 30 points or more. That will be all the safe states for Republicans. Moving into the likely states, we're going to begin with the Democrats, and we're going to start from the East. First, we're going to do Maine. Maine's a very hard one to really analyze because there has been no data out at all. Angus King had won his previous elections by very comfortable amounts. He is an independent, but he does caucus with the Democrats, as well as Bernie Sanders, who's also going to win by a safe margin. So for now, I'm going to leave this in the likely column. However, there is not enough data to show it right now being in the safe column, since I do expect it on the presidential level to be closer. And we're going to go down now to Maryland. And Maryland's probably a state that surprises a lot of people because it's a state where Democrats usually win by upwards of 30 points. But the previous governor, Larry Hogan, who's running for the Senate, is going to face off against Also Brooks. There was a primary in Maryland recently, and Also Brooks won by a pretty large amount. It was supposed to be a lot closer, but she won pretty easily. And we can see here, there's no polls that have been released after this primary, but the polls that we do have currently do show Logan winning by a large amount in most of them, and in the most recent, she has a 10-point lead. Once again, we need more data on this since we know that it is going to be this matchup. But for now, I'm going to leave it as a Democrat likely state, since a lot of Republican governors, former governor, Democrat former governors, they'd run for the Senate in a state that doesn't really favor them. They're going to lead a lot of the polls early on by large amounts, but later on, a lot of these candidates will catch up, and maybe this is the first glimpse of that, but we're going to have to see. Another state that's going to be likely for Democrats is the state of New Mexico. Now in New Mexico, there isn't much data at all to really show anything, but we can definitely go off of trends and what we think, and this state will probably fall in the likely column. Next, we're going to go over a few Republican likely states, of which there are two main ones, beginning with the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, Scott leads by 10.6% on average. This is a state that has been trending right. And Scott's, the type of guy who had won all his previous elections by very, very narrow amounts. When he was governor, he won by a very narrow amount. And as we can see here in 2018, he had won by a very narrow amount, 0.2%. But this time around, it's not going to be the case. This poll from FAU even has him up by 17%. That's, I don't think he's going to win by 17, But I do think it's very, safe to say he's going to win by 10. And, if we go back to the midterms, Marco Rubio ended up winning his Senate seat in 2022 by 16. So we can definitely maybe even put this in the safe column. But for now, with the data we have, I'm going to put this in the likely column. Similar thing with Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz had definitely a run for his money in his last election where he won by 2.6%. But this time around, he's been leading all the polls very consistently, mostly by likely amounts, and he is up 8.2% on average. It's another state that Trump's been also doing very good in, so I'm sure that will help Cruz. I do think Trump is going to do better than Cruz, since Cruz is pretty unpopular in some areas, but Allred is very overrated and definitely not, as good as what Beta was able to do in 2018 and make this margin so close. So for now, I think this state is going to be in the likely column. And we can see here that Republicans are already at 50 seats. And this is why, everyone's saying that Republicans are most likely going to take the Senate, is because even without, factoring all the lean states, they're already at 50. So if Trump wins, then Trump's VP will be the breaking tie vote and Republicans will have 51. But anyways, these are the states remaining. And before we get into the most competitive states, let me get Virginia out of the way as the first lean state. And once again, no data out of Virginia for the most part. We don't even have the Republican nominee, although I do think it's going to be Hung Kao, but we don't know just yet. Kane's running for his third term, I believe. And I do think he's going to win, but we don't have any data since the primaries haven't even finished yet. So for now, I'm going to keep it in the lean column. I do think Trump's going to do better in Virginia from the polls we have there, but I think still that Kane will win by at least a decent amount. All right, now we're going to get into some other closer lean states for Democrats. Number one is going to be Pennsylvania. Originally in Pennsylvania, you could say that it could fall into the likely column since Bob Casey is so popular in the state and he has won all his elections by very, very comfortable amounts. But this time around, since it is a presidential year and Trump is on the ballot, ticket splitting is not going to be that much. And since I do right now expect Trump to win Pennsylvania narrowly, and where he is leading by 2%, I expect Bob Casey to outrun him by, not more than 6 points. So this is, this sounds pretty accurate almost. I think he's going to win by in the middle of the lean margin for now. McCormick is definitely going to, I don't think the best candidate, but he definitely works for, this state. And he's running against such a popular incumbent. So it's going to be very hard for him to flip this state. For now, I think it's going to be a lean state for Democrats. And the same thing for the state of Wisconsin, where we have another incumbent Democrat, Tammy Baldwin, running against a really not too much known Republican as of now. So, definitely getting his name out there would help him a lot. And Baldwin had won 2018 by double digits and had won 2012, a presidential year, by 5.5. This time around, I don't think she's going to win by 6.8. I do think she's going to win right now in the lean margin. But, I think the margins will be more narrow than the previous 2 years. The previous 6 years before. And for now, I keep this in the lean state for Democrats. Okay, now we're going to get to the most competitive seats, and these are the seats that I believe will be in the tilt margin. We're going to begin on the West Coast with the state of Nevada. Now, in Nevada, it's a very, very tight race, I believe, and Brown will be the nominee, in my opinion, not Marchant. So this will end up being the race, and, there isn't too much polling out of, a lot of these states. Even Ohio, there hasn't been much polling at all, and there definitely should be, especially since the primary is over now. But for now, Rosen does lead. She is the incumbent. There are still a lot of undecideds, and the last poll did have it as a tie. But for now, I'm going to give it to Rosen by a tilt amount. And in Arizona, originally, I was more unsure about this race. I didn't know exactly who had the advantage. But I think now definitely I can see Gallego having more of an advantage, since in this same CBS poll where Gallego leads by 13, Trump actually led by, I believe, 5. Gallego is not going to outperform Trump that much, but I think Kit Lake is very unpopular right now in this state. She had barely lost 2 years prior, but right now I think unless something changes, this state will also go to Democrats by a smaller margin than this. This will definitely narrow, but I think right now let's still go there by just under 2 percentage points. And moving up to Montana, Montana is probably one of the most important seats and one that has not even seen a poll come out since the beginning of March. And in that poll, Tester was up by 2. And as we, see in a lot of these other states, that these candidates that run in other states often do good, a lot better in the beginning of the cycle, but then later on, the opponent will catch up, especially if the state is a lot more Republican or Democrat in a presidential year, especially. And Tester had won both races by a pretty narrow amount. And I think this is the race in which he will lose, especially to a candidate who's really trying to get his name out now, Sheehy. And I think he will beat Tester this time around and flip the seat to Republicans. Moving over to the state of Michigan. Michigan is also a state Michigan is a state that does not have an incumbent since she retired. So we have an open seat here, and it's most likely going to be Rogers versus Slotkin, in which it is a very close race with a lot of undecideds. 39% for Slotkin, 38% for Rogers. There's a lot of undecideds. And so this is going to be a very close race. The polls have it as a very, very narrow race right now. And, like a lot of other ones, they need polling. I think Trump right now has an advantage in Michigan by a very narrow amount, but this is a state that leans Democrat on the Senate level and governor race. The governor was able to win by a very, very comfortable amount in 2022. And right now, I think Democrats will slightly hold on to this seat. And last but not least, probably one of the most important races in this election is the state of Ohio. In the state of Ohio, Sherrod Brown is running for his third term, I believe. And then he is facing against Bernie Moreno here, who had recently won. Supposedly close race, but he ended up winning by a lot more than people expected. Currently, Brown is up by 5 points, but once again, these polls were before the primary, and they are around 2 months old now, even longer than 2 months old, in which there are still a lot of undecideds. I think in the next polls, we're going to see Moreno catch up for sure and maybe pull that lead. Brown has, narrowly won his other elections, not by too much, but, this is 2012, a year where Barack Obama had won Ohio, so he was riding with Obama. And in 2018, it was a blue year where he did perform okay. He did perform good in the state. But nowadays, especially with Trump on the ballot in a state where it's increasingly Republican every single cycle. And, in this day and age, there has been almost no ticket splitting, especially among the Senate. In 2020, there was only one ticket split where Susan Collins had won Maine, while Biden had won Maine as well. In 2016, there were actually 0 ticket splitting states. All this leads to me putting this state in the tilt column for Republicans. And this would be the final map. 52 for Republicans, 48 for Democrats. Democrats will hold on to a lot of these states in the Sun Belt and in the Rust Belt by narrow amounts, and Republicans will flip West Virginia easily and Ohio and Montana by narrow margins. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment on this video, and I'll check you guys out on the next one.